I thought I was marrying the love of my life until his family's dark secret surfaced at our wedding. When his mother forced me to my knees in front of everyone, I discovered the shocking truth about what they really wanted from me and why a stranger risked everything to save me. If you think you've heard crazy wedding stories before, wait until you hear this one. Make sure to like this video and subscribe because this family drama gets absolutely insane. My name is Carolyn, and I need to tell you about the day that changed my entire life forever. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my existence, but it turned into something I never could have imagined in my worst nightmares. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was just a small-town girl from Kansas, working as a librarian and living a quiet, simple life. That's when I met Daniel at the state university where I was taking evening classes for my master's degree. He was everything I thought I wanted, tall, charming, with perfectly styled brown hair and a smile that could light up any room. But more than that, he came from money. Real money. The kind of family that owned multiple businesses and had their name on buildings. I remember thinking I was the luckiest girl in the world when he asked me out. Here was this gorgeous, wealthy man who seemed genuinely interested in little old me. We dated for 2 years, and during that time, his family appeared to welcome me with open arms. His mother, Helen, was particularly sweet to me, always asking about my family history and showing such interest in my background. I thought it was because she genuinely cared about her son's girlfriend. What I didn't realize was that every question she asked, every seemingly innocent conversation about my grandmother who had passed away the year before, was all part of a carefully orchestrated plan. You see, my grandmother had left me something I barely understood the value of. A large piece of land in downtown Kansas City that had been in our family for generations. What I thought was just some old property was actually worth millions due to recent development in the area. When Daniel proposed to me on Christmas morning with a stunning diamond ring, I cried tears of pure joy. His family insisted on paying for everything, the venue, the flowers, the catering, even my dress, a beautiful ivory silk gown that cost more than I made in 6 months. At the time, I thought they were just being generous because they had money and wanted their son's wedding to be perfect. The warning signs were there, but I was too blinded by love and excitement to see them. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Helen started having these secretive meetings with other family members. Conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. Daniel became increasingly nervous and distant, claiming it was just pre-wedding jitters. When I tried to talk to him about it, he would brush off my concerns and change the subject. 3 days before the wedding, I overheard Helen on the phone talking to someone about finalizing the paperwork and making sure everything was ready for Saturday. When I asked Daniel about it, he claimed his mother was just handling some business arrangements and that I shouldn't worry about it. The morning of my wedding day, I should have felt nothing but excitement and anticipation. Instead, I had this weird knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. As my bridesmaids helped me into that gorgeous dress and fixed my hair and makeup, I kept catching glimpses of Helen in the background, constantly on her phone with a look on her face that wasn't quite right. Her smile seemed forced, and her eyes were cold in a way I'd never noticed before. The church was absolutely packed. 350 guests filled every pew, but as I looked around from the bridal room, I realized I didn't recognize at least half of them. When I asked Daniel about all these unfamiliar faces, he said they were distant relatives and business associates his family felt obligated to invite. Again, I pushed down my unease and told myself everything was fine. The music started, and it was time. My heart was pounding as I made my way to the back of the church. The doors opened, and there was my Prince Charming standing at the altar in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo. The entire congregation stood and turned to look at me. I should have felt like a princess walking down that aisle, but something felt wrong. Daniel wasn't smiling the way I expected. Instead, he looked almost guilty. I was halfway down the aisle when I noticed Helen whispering urgently to several family members in the front row. They were all looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite read, but I kept walking, clutching my bouquet of white roses and trying to focus on Daniel's face. That's when everything went horribly wrong. Just as I reached the front of the church, just 3 steps away from the altar where Daniel was waiting, Helen suddenly stood up and raised her hand. "Stop!" she called out in a voice that carried through the entire church. The music stopped abruptly. Every single person in that church turned to stare at Helen and then at me. I stood there frozen, not understanding what was happening. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might explode. "Before this ceremony can continue," Helen announced in a voice that was nothing like the sweet, motherly tone she'd always used with me, "there's something that needs to be addressed." I looked at Daniel, expecting him to tell his mother to sit down, that this was inappropriate. Instead, he just stood there looking at his shoes, his face red with what I now realize was shame. "Carolyn, dear," Helen continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I'm afraid you need to kneel." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me?" I managed to whisper. "It's an ancient family tradition," she said louder, making sure everyone in the church could hear. "Before a woman can marry into our family, she must kneel and show proper respect. She must acknowledge that she understands her place and her duties as a wife." The entire church was dead silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. This had to be some kind of joke, some weird family ritual I didn't understand. But as I looked around, I saw that Daniel's relatives were all nodding approvingly, as if this was completely normal. "Helen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I don't understand. No one mentioned any tradition like this before." Her mask slipped completely then, and I saw her true face for the first time. Cold, calculating, and cruel. "Oh, but there's so much you don't understand, dear Carolyn. Like why we were so eager to welcome you into our family. Like why Daniel pursued you so persistently." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Your grandmother's land, sweetheart. That lovely little inheritance you mentioned. Turns out it's worth about $12 million now that the city has approved the new shopping complex development right next to it." The world tilted on its axis. I felt like I was going to be sick right there in front of everyone. "That's not— Daniel loves me. This isn't about money." Helen's laugh was like ice. "Oh, you sweet, naive little girl. Daniel has been playing his part beautifully, haven't you, son?" I turned to look at Daniel, desperate for him to deny it, to tell his mother she was wrong, to defend me and our love. Instead, he finally looked up and met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart into a million pieces. Guilt, shame, but not love. Not anymore, if it had ever been real at all. "Now," Helen continued, "if you want to marry into this family and gain our protection and status, you'll need to show proper humility. Kneel, apologize for your presumption, and then we'll have you sign some papers that will make everything official." Papers. My grandmother's land. It all clicked into place with horrible clarity. This wasn't a wedding, it was a business transaction, and I was the product being sold. "I won't do it," I said, surprised by how strong my voice sounded despite the fact that I was dying inside. Helen's face twisted with anger. "You'll do it, or you'll leave this church alone and empty-handed. Daniel won't marry you without family approval. Will you, son?" Again, I looked at Daniel, giving him one last chance to prove that what we had was real. One last chance to choose me over his family's greed. But he just stood there, silent and cowardly. That's when something miraculous happened. A man stood up in the very back of the church. I had never seen him before in my life, but everything about him commanded attention. He was tall and distinguished, probably in his early 40s, wearing an expensive charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my car. His dark hair was slightly silver at the temples, and he had the kind of presence that made the entire room turn to look at him. "That's enough," he said, and his voice carried easily through the entire church despite not being raised. There was an authority in his tone that made even Helen pause. He began walking down the aisle toward us, and with each step he took, I could feel the energy in the room shifting. Helen's confident smirk was starting to fade, replaced by confusion and something that looked almost like fear. "I'm sorry," Helen said, trying to regain control of the situation. "But I don't believe we've been introduced. This is a private family ceremony." The stranger had reached the front of the church now, and when he smiled, it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that promised consequences. "Oh, but Helen Morrison, or should I say Helen Crawford, we have met before. You just don't remember me." The color drained from Helen's face completely. "I don't know what you're talking about." "My name is Jonathan Miller," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the church, "and I'm a private investigator. I've been watching your family for the past 8 months." You could have heard a pin drop in that church. Helen looked like she was going to faint, and Daniel had gone from red to completely white. Jonathan turned to address the congregation, but his words were clearly meant for Helen. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, you're not witnessing a wedding today. You're witnessing an attempted fraud. This family has done this before, multiple times in fact. They research wealthy young women, usually ones who have recently inherited property or money, and then they have their son romance them into marriage. Once the marriage is legal, they use various forms of manipulation and legal pressure to gain control of the woman's assets." My legs felt weak. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about Daniel, about the past 2 years, was crumbling around me. "Their previous victims," Jonathan continued, "include Jennifer Walsh in Colorado. They took her ranch, Amanda Foster in Texas, her family's oil investments, and Margaret Chen in California, her tech startup inheritance. All young women who thought they were in love, all left with nothing after these people were finished with them." Helen was frantically shaking her head. "This is ridiculous. I don't know who you are or what you think you're proving, but you made a mistake this time," Jonathan interrupted. "You see, Carolyn's grandmother was a very smart woman. Before she passed away, she suspected something wasn't quite right about Daniel's sudden interest in her granddaughter, so she hired my firm to investigate." I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. My grandmother had known? She had tried to protect me even after death? Jonathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Martha Peterson left very detailed instructions about what to do if our investigation revealed what she suspected. She also left something else. He turned to me with kind eyes. "Carolyn, your grandmother left you a letter. She made me promise to give it to you if this day ever came." With shaking hands, I took the envelope. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's familiar handwriting, and as I read her words, tears began streaming down my face. She had known. She had seen through Daniel's act from the very beginning, but she also knew I wouldn't believe her if she simply told me. So she had arranged for the truth to come out in a way that would protect me. But there was more in that envelope. Legal documents that showed my grandmother had placed the land in a trust that couldn't be touched by anyone except me, and only after I turned 30 or got married to someone who signed a prenuptial agreement protecting my assets. She had made it impossible for anyone to marry me just for my inheritance. "The authorities are waiting outside," Jonathan announced. "Helen Morrison, Daniel Morrison, and 3 other family members are going to be arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. The evidence we've gathered over the past 8 months is quite comprehensive." As if on cue, police officers began entering the church. The guests, most of whom I now realized were probably in on the scheme, were getting restless and trying to slip out quietly. Helen made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Carolyn, don't listen to him. We love you like a daughter. This is all a misunderstanding." But I was done being manipulated. I looked at her, then at Daniel, then at the man who had been pretending to love me for 2 years. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church. "I actually did love you, Daniel. I would have given you anything you asked for, freely, if you had just been honest with me. If you had truly loved me back." Daniel finally found his voice, but it was too late. "Carolyn, please, I do love you. This got out of hand, but my feelings are real." I shook my head. "No, Daniel. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't stand silently while someone tries to humiliate the person they claim to care about." I turned to Jonathan, who had been watching this exchange with a mixture of professional satisfaction and genuine concern for me. "Thank you," I said simply. "Thank you for honoring my grandmother's wishes and for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life." As Helen and Daniel were led away in handcuffs, and as the fake wedding guests scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on, I stood in that beautiful church in my expensive wedding dress, feeling strangely free for the first time in months. Jonathan approached me carefully. "I know this has been overwhelming, and I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Your grandmother wanted you to have the choice to discover the truth for yourself, even if it was painful." "She was protecting me," I said, understanding finally flooding through me. "Even after she was gone, she was still protecting me." "She was a remarkable woman," he agreed. "She also left instructions for me to help you with anything you might need in the aftermath of all this: legal support, financial advice, even just someone to talk to who understands what you've been through." 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment in Kansas City, successfully running my own consulting business, when Jonathan called to tell me that Helen and Daniel had been sentenced to prison for their crimes. The other victims had come forward, and justice had finally been served. But here's the part of the story that still amazes me. Jonathan and I had kept in touch throughout the legal proceedings, and somewhere along the way, our professional relationship had become something more. He wasn't just a private investigator. He was also a successful businessman who had built his company from nothing and genuinely cared about helping people. Unlike Daniel, Jonathan never asked about my money or my inheritance. He fell in love with me, the real me, not what I could provide for him. When he finally told me he loved me 8 months after that horrible wedding day, I knew without a doubt that his feelings were genuine. We got married a year later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. No drama, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. Just 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, choosing to build a life together based on honesty, respect, and genuine love. My grandmother's final gift to me wasn't just the land or the money she left in trust. It was the lesson that real love doesn't try to control or deceive you. Real love protects you, supports you, and stands up for you when you can't stand up for yourself. And sometimes, real love comes from the most unexpected places, like a stranger in the back of a church who risks everything to tell you the truth. So that's my story. The day I thought would be the beginning of my happily ever after turned out to be the day I discovered what real love actually looks like. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever dealt with toxic family members or discovered that someone you loved was using you, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve someone who loves you for exactly who you are, not for what you can give them. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.